Hi-Fi Audio sent me their new Zen Phono 3 preamp for review, and at the same time, someone reached out and asked if I would be interested in buying their vintage turntable. So I thought it would be fun to take you along with me to buy that turntable, pair it with the Zen Phono 3, and try to determine if it will help improve the sound. Now be sure to stick around because I'm buying vintage gear and there's a great chance that this turntable will not even work. But even if it doesn't work, don't worry because I've got a backup plan to fully test this preamp with. But first, we got to see if I can even buy this turntable. Let's head that way now. All right, I just finished up filling up with gas. I am kind of out in the middle of nowhere, it feels like. Honestly, I'm doing like an almost 2-hour drive to meet this person and hopefully settle on a deal and buy some vintage gear with a turntable included. Who knows, maybe I'll get lucky and there's some records as well. Sometimes, my friends, you just got to hit the road and get out of town and find the good deals. So that's what I'm trying to do today. It's been a nice country drive filled with some REM jams from this compilation. Part lies, part heart, part truth, part garbage from 82 to 2011. This is a 2-disc set, so I got plenty of REM to get me there and back today. But I'm just a few miles away, so I'm going to head that way now, and hopefully I can get this deal done and bring home some vintage gear, including a great Sony turntable. Okay, I just finished loading up the car and I am so hot and sweaty. I apologize. The reason why I'm hot and sweaty is because I bought a lot more than just a turntable. I got a turntable, I got 2 to 3 boxes of great records, and I bought a gigantic receiver. All right, the car's packed, I'm hot. I'm gonna head home about an hour and 45 minutes. Once I get there, I'll unload and show you what I got. Okay, I just got home. Let me pop the trunk and show you what I got. Okay, well, this is actually just a giant box of records. And there's the turntable back there. Oh man, look how messy my trunk is. All right, so I was able to get the turntable. This is a gigantic receiver that I'm going to save as a surprise if it doesn't break my back getting it out of here. But stay tuned later for another video on that. So let me get these records out and then I'll show you this turntable. Okay, here's the turntable and sort of everything else I bought except for that receiver, which I'm not going to tell you about right now. They said they put a new needle on it, so I'm not sure. We'll have to check that out. But we'll get that inside soon and look at it closer. But I just bought all these records. These are all backwards, but you should recognize what that one is backwards. So all of this is just great classic rock stuff that's going to be perfect for my booth and a couple of upcoming record shows. See, I think there's a Cream record right there. Yep, all of it. So, and also a broken equalizer. Supposedly broken, we'll find out. All right, let me get all this stuff inside. Now, before I bring in the Sony turntable and set it up and see if everything works properly, I want to run through a few options on the Hi-Fi Audio Zen Phono 3 preamp here. Now, when it comes to preamps, there's not a lot of features to talk through. It's basically the whole job is to amplify the signal coming from that small tiny needle on your turntable and make it loud enough so that we can hear it. But a lot of phono preamps give the ability to select between different cartridges, and that's what the Zen Phono 3 does here. You can have a moving magnet cartridge, which is what I have selected because that's what I use, or a moving coil cartridge. Now, if you are someone that uses moving coil cartridges, you'll notice here that there is a load switch that you can change between that will just basically help you dial in the sound of your specific cartridge. There's not much else to talk through. There's a power switch here, and a subsonic filter, which is something that I'll describe a little bit later when I talk about sound. So make sure you stick around for that because this is an interesting little button. Let me turn this guy around and show you a couple more options on the back. Now, looking at the rear of the unit, two things stand out to me. The first is you've got your normal RCA outputs here that would run to either your preamp or your amplifier, but there's also a balanced 4.4 millimeter output here if that's something that you're interested in. There's also a gain switch here with 4 gain settings. Now, I use a moving magnet cartridge like I mentioned earlier, so I just have it set to 1. But if you have a moving coil cartridge, there's a high, low, and V-low setting, which the high is 48 decibels, the low is 60 decibels, and the V-low is 72 decibels. So if you have a moving coil cartridge, you can use this gain switch to dial in the gain as needed. Okay, here's the turntable. The Sony PST3, Terminator 3 maybe, I don't know. I've got it plugged in. Let's just put a record on here and just see if it even works at all. Because these old turntables, if they've been sitting a while, they get gummed up, and sometimes you got to get in there and just clean everything out before you'll know if it works. But good news is the mechanism there is working, and looks like the arm dropped. Now that cartridge is basically touching the LP right here. Luckily, I'm using just like a cheap record here. I think $1 album I have, but that's riding way too low. So I need to balance this tone arm before I can test it with this preamp. Let's see if the stop function works though. Well, it looks like it doesn't want to stop. So that's something that we might have to address there. The good news is I can actually move the needle manually over here and it will play. However, this whole system here, manual, automatic, and start stop, is basically not working. And that's kind of a common issue on these vintage turntables with this fully automatic system, but it is usually repairable. So I'm going to set this one aside and get underneath and see if I can figure that out. Sometimes it's a cracked gear that you can replace to fix all of that. Sometimes it's just gummed up and you need to get some grease cleaned out and get it rolling that way. I'm actually still excited that I have this turntable. Again, it was released in 1977 and it probably hasn't seen much use as of late. So some of these issues are kind of to be expected. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to take this turntable and spend time listening to it with the iFi Zen Phono 3 here, but that's not a problem because I have actually already spent a couple of weeks listening with that preamp and my vintage Pioneer PL560 turntable here. So I kind of already have a great idea of what this little preamp can do to further benefit the sound using a vintage turntable. Let's talk about those sound advantages next. Well, even though I wasn't able to get the Sony turntable paired with this preamp, I was able to spend the last couple weeks listening to the Zen Phono 3 with my regular vintage turntable, which is my Pioneer PL560. And I'll be honest with you, I have really enjoyed the way this phono preamp brings out the life in my music. Now, be sure to stick around because at the end of this, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this Subsonic Filter button and whether or not I was able to hear that much of a difference when it was engaged. Now, one of the first albums I listened to was It's Time by Jackie McLean. And I've listened to this album plenty of times before, but the Phono 3 really seemed to bring out some extra life in this recording that I hadn't heard before with other products that I've used. For instance, whenever I'm listening to a new external phono preamp, I want to make sure there's good channel separation and instrument separation. A cheap phono preamp can sometimes sound like all the instruments are being squashed through one little tube coming at you, and it just doesn't sound very lively. Well, that's not the case with the Zen Phono 3. For instance, Jackie McLean's saxophone playing was very clear in the left speaker, while Charles Tolliver's trumpet playing was great in the right speaker. And interestingly enough, Herbie Hancock is on this recording playing piano, and all of his instrumentation and comping came through really well, almost centered in the recording, and it really just sort of balanced everything out. Now, I learned something new while listening to this album, which is that Charles Tolliver, the trumpet player, was actually studying to be a pharmacist for like 3 years
decided that that wasn't for him and had been playing jazz the entire time and decided to focus on that full time. This is his first recording, and he has 3 compositions on this album. Now, that is definitely a jump in terms of working your way up the musician ladder, to go from being studying for a pharmacist one day and then getting 3 songs recorded on a Jackie McLean album, not to mention a classic one like It's Time. But overall, the Zen Phono 3 just made this album really exciting and fun and punchy to listen to. Legendary Los Angeles punk band X just released a new album called Smoke and Fiction, and I've been spinning this album a lot lately in preparation for their final tour, which I have tickets for here in Nashville this October. My favorite song so far on the new album is Flipside, with the classic vocals of Exene and John Doe, and the Zen 3 handled the playback with ease. The music was punchy and the bass was present. It made the album sound energetic and really get me excited to see them live in a couple of months. So let's talk about the Subsonic Filter button. According to iFi, standard subsonic filters aren't intelligent and are typically loathed by audiophiles. They filter not only the bass rumble from warped records, but also the bass of the song. Our intelligent subsonic filter knows the difference between the two and only filters the warp, leaving the song completely intact and without adding group delay. So what did I hear with this button engaged? Well, I'll be honest with you, I don't really have any warped records. Generally speaking, if I have a warped record, I usually trade it in and upgrade and just make sure that I have one that's not warped when I'm listening to it. So I didn't have a warped record to test with this subsonic filter, and I'm not sure if that's required in order to hear a difference or not. I did engage and disengage the button while listening to just my normal flat records and didn't really hear that much of a difference. So I can't really speak to whether or not it made a major impact or not, but hey, it's there. And if you have warped records, you know, it's just an added feature that you can use while listening to those and try to determine if it helps better reproduce the sound than a phono preamp that doesn't have this filter. All in all, at $250, the Zen Phono 3 is a great sounding and reliable preamp, paired great with my vintage turntable, and it would pair great with a modern day turntable as well. It's got that balanced output if that's something you're interested in, and anyone can use it since you can use it with both moving coil and moving magnet cartridges. But if you're looking for something a little bit more affordable, you might be interested in a phono preamp that I reviewed earlier this year that comes in at under $100. If you're interested in learning more about the IEMA T3 Pro, you can do so by clicking this video here.